The message arrived like a crack in glass. A stranger's face that looked exactly like hers. Her mother kept one twin and gave away another. Some secrets don't die. They just wait underground. If your mother kept a secret like this, could you forgive her? The message arrives on a Tuesday night, when Liana is halfway through her third cup of coffee and staring at a design mock-up she's been tweaking for hours. Her phone vibrates once, sharp against the wooden desk. She glances at the screen without thinking. Just another notification, probably spam. Maybe Devin asking if she's eaten yet. But it's not Devin. The sender's name is unfamiliar. Cale Heron. The preview text reads, "I know this will sound impossible, but I think we're related." Liana's hand freezes over the mouse. The apartment around her feels suddenly too quiet. The hum of the city outside pressing against the windows like something waiting. She picks up her phone and the cold weight of it settles into her palm like a stone. She opens the message. "My name is Kyle. I was adopted at birth, and I recently found documents that suggest I have a sister. I believe that sister is you. I've attached a photograph. Please, if you have a moment, look at it. I think you'll understand." The photograph loads slowly, pixel by pixel, as if the universe is giving her one last chance to look away. But she doesn't. She can't. It's a childhood photo, faded and grainy, the colors washed out the way old film always is. A boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, stands beside a woman in a pale blue dress. The woman's face is turned slightly towards the camera, her expression soft but distant. Her dark hair falls over one shoulder. Her eyes are unmistakable. Liana's breath catches. The woman in the photograph is her mother, Mira. Her mother, who died when Liana was 7 years old. Her mother, who left behind a single shoebox of photographs, none of which included this boy. Her mother, who never mentioned a son, a sibling, a secret. Liana zooms in on the boy's face. His eyes are wide, dark, familiar in a way that makes her stomach twist. They look like hers. She sets the phone down on the desk, but her hand is trembling now, and the screen flickers in the dim light of her apartment. She glances toward the chair in the corner where her mother's old scarf is draped. Soft wool, deep burgundy, fraying slightly at the edges. She's kept it for 20 years, wrapping herself in it on cold nights, burying her face in the fabric, even though it stopped smelling like her mother a long time ago. But now, looking at it, she feels something shift. The scarf is just cloth. The photograph is just paper. And her mother, the woman she thought she knew, the woman she's grieved for most of her life, is suddenly a stranger. Liana picks up her phone again and reads the message 3 more times, searching for signs of a scam, a cruel joke, a mistake. But the photograph doesn't lie. The boy's face, the woman's posture, the way the light falls across them both. It's real. She knows it the way you know a storm is coming, the way you know when something irrevocable has already begun. She scrolls back to the sender's name, Kyle Heron. She says it aloud, testing the sound of it in her mouth, and it feels foreign and intimate all at once. Her apartment feels smaller now, the walls pressing in. The silence outside has become oppressive, thick with all the questions she doesn't know how to ask. She thinks about calling Devin, but what would she even say? A stranger just told me I have a brother. Here's a photo of my dead mother holding him. She looks at the photograph again. The boy is smiling, just barely. Her mother isn't. Liana's hands are still shaking, and she realizes she's been holding her breath. She exhales slowly, deliberately, trying to steady herself. But the certainty she's carried her entire life, the story she's told herself about who she is, where she came from, what her mother's life meant, is cracking, hairline fractures spreading outward from a single impossible image. She types a reply before she can stop herself. "Who are you?" She hits send, and then she waits. Liana doesn't sleep that night. She sits at her desk, the photograph open on her phone, zooming in and out until the pixels blur into meaningless shapes. She searches for inconsistencies, for signs of digital manipulation, for anything that might let her dismiss this as a mistake. But the image holds. The woman in the pale blue dress is her mother. The boy beside her could be her. By the time dawn breaks, she's exhausted and wired, her coffee gone cold in the mug beside her keyboard. She wraps her mother's scarf around her shoulders and tries to focus on work. A logo redesigned for a boutique hotel. Clean lines, minimalist aesthetic, nothing that requires her to think too deeply. But her hands keep drifting back to her phone, refreshing her messages, waiting for a response that doesn't come. Sunday arrives the way it always does, quietly, inevitably. Liana drives to the cemetery just after sunrise, the city still half asleep around her. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet grass and fresh earth. Mist clings to the headstones, softening their edges, making the whole place feel like something out of a dream. She parks near the entrance and walks the familiar path, her footsteps muted against the gravel. Her mother's grave is simple. A flat stone marker, worn smooth by 20 years of weather. Mira Voss, beloved mother. No dates. Liana never knew why her mother left them off. Maybe she didn't want to be remembered as someone who died too young. Maybe she wanted to be remembered as something other than a collection of years. Liana kneels beside the grave and places a small bouquet of wildflowers against the stone. She does this every Sunday, has done it since she was old enough to drive herself here. It's a ritual, a way of keeping her mother close, of pretending the silence between them isn't permanent. But today, the ritual feels different. She stares at the name carved into the stone and thinks about the boy in the photograph. She thinks about all the things her mother never told her, about her father, whoever he was, about the life she lived before Liana was born, about whether she ever regretted the choices she made. Liana has always felt incomplete, like a story with pages torn out. She used to think that was just grief, the natural ache of losing someone too soon. But now she wonders if it was something else, if her mother carried secrets so heavy they left marks on both of them. The birds are waking, their calls soft and tentative in the early light. The cemetery smells faintly of lavender. Or maybe that's just her imagination, the ghost of a perfume her mother used to wear. Liana closes her eyes and tries to remember her mother's voice, but all she gets is an echo, something distant and blurred. She pulls the scarf tighter around her shoulders. When she stands to leave, she sees Devin waiting by her car, hands in his pockets, his expression careful. He's been her friend since childhood, steady and protective in a way that sometimes feels like being watched over. He knows her routines. He knows she comes here every Sunday, and he knows, without her having to say it, that something is wrong. "You okay?" he asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Liana doesn't respond right away. She unlocks the car and climbs into the driver's seat, and Devin slides into the passenger side without being invited. They sit in silence for a moment, the windows fogging slightly from their breath. Finally, she shows him her phone. "I got a message," she says, "from someone who says he's my brother." Devin takes the phone and reads the message slowly, his brow furrowing. When he sees the photograph, his jaw tightens. He zooms in, studies the woman's face, the boy's eyes. Then he hands the phone back. "Could be a scam," he says, his voice low and cautious. "People do this kind of thing. They find old photos online, piece together a story, try to manipulate you." "I know," Liana says, "but you don't think it is." She looks down at the photograph again. The boy's eyes, her mother's expression, the way the light falls across them both, gentle and sad. "No," she says quietly. "I don't." Devin exhales, rubbing a hand over his face. "Liana, your mom never mentioned a brother. Not once. Don't you think if you had one, she would have told you?" "She never mentioned my father either," Liana says. "She never mentioned a lot of things." Devin doesn't have an answer for that. They sit in the car for a while longer, watching the mist lift off the headstones, the cemetery slowly coming into focus. Liana can feel Devin's concern radiating off him, but she also knows he won't push. He never does. He just stays, solid and present, waiting for her to decide what comes next. When she gets home, she pins the photograph to the wall above her desk. She stares at it while she works, while she eats, while she pretends to watch a movie she's seen a dozen times. She can't stop looking at the boy's face, searching for herself in the shape of his jaw, the curve of his smile. Late that night, she opens her laptop and starts searching. Adoption records, hospital logs, old newspaper archives. Anything that might explain how a boy who looks like her ended up in a photograph with her dead mother. She doesn't find answers, but she finds questions. Dozens of them, branching out in every direction, each one leading deeper into a past she thought she understood. Her phone vibrates just before midnight. Another message from Kyle. "I know this is hard to believe, but I can prove it. Meet me." Liana's hand hovers over the screen, her pulse loud in her ears. She thinks about her mother's grave, about the silence that's lived between them for 20 years. She thinks about Devin's warning, about the possibility that this is all a lie designed to hurt her. But she also thinks about the boy's eyes. She types a response. "Where?" The cafe is small and tucked into a corner lot near Harrow Point, a stretch of coastline Liana hasn't visited in years. She used to come here with her mother when she was young. Back when the world felt simpler. Back when she didn't know enough to ask the right questions. The ocean is visible through the wide front windows, gray and restless under a low sky. Liana arrives early. She sits at a table near the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hasn't touched. Her mother's scarf is draped over her shoulders, and she keeps adjusting it, pulling it tighter, then loosening it again. A nervous habit. She's brought the photograph with her. Not the digital version on her phone, but a printed copy she made last night. It sits folded in her jacket pocket, close enough to feel its weight. When Kyle walks in, she knows him immediately. He's tall, lean, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans. His hair is the same shade as hers, almost black, with a slight wave to it. But it's his face that stops her breath. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his eyes scan the room, dark and careful. He has their mother's features softened slightly, rearranged into something unmistakably masculine, but undeniably familiar. He sees her and hesitates for just a moment, as if he's searching for the same recognition she's feeling. Then he walks over, his movements deliberate and calm. "Liana?" he says. She nods, unable to speak yet. He sits down across from her, and for a long moment, they just look at each other. The silence between them is heavy, weighted with everything they don't yet know how to say. Outside, the waves crash against the rocks, a low rhythmic sound that fills the gaps in their conversation. "You look like her," Kale says finally, his voice quiet. "More than I expected." "So do you," Liana replies. He exhales, something between relief and sadness, and pulls a folder from his bag. He sets it on the table between them, then opens it carefully, as if the contents might shatter. Inside are documents, adoption papers, yellowed and official-looking, stamped with dates and signatures. "I was adopted at birth, Nabayo," he says. "Grew up 2 states away, in a small town near the coast. My parents, my adoptive parents, we were good people. They told me I was adopted when I was 8 years old, but they didn't have much information. Closed adoption. All they knew was the birth mother's first name. He slides one of the papers toward her. Liana's hands are shaking as she picks it up. The document is cool and smooth under her fingers, slightly brittle at the edges. She scans the text quickly, her eyes catching on the details that matter. Mother's name, Mira Voss. Date of birth, April 14th, 1968. The same name, the same birth date. Liana's vision blurs for a second, and she has to blink hard to clear it. She sets the paper down and presses her palms flat against the table, grounding herself in something solid. I didn't believe it at first, Cale says. Even when I found the documents, I thought maybe it was a coincidence or a mistake. But then I found the photograph. He reaches into the folder again and pulls out the original. The same image Liana has memorized by now, but sharper, more vivid in physical form. He places it between them like evidence in a trial neither of them agreed to participate in. Liana stares at it. The boy. The woman. The pale blue dress. The way her mother's hand rests on the boy's shoulder. Gentle but uncertain. "Where did you get this?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was in a box my adoptive mother kept," Cale says. "She passed away 2 years ago. I was going through her things, and I found it tucked inside an envelope with my adoption paperwork. There was no note, no explanation, just the photo." Liana picks up the photograph, turning it over in her hands. There's nothing written on the back. No date, no names, no clue about when or where it was taken. Just an image of a moment that shouldn't exist. "I spent months trying to find you," Cale continues. "I hired someone to track down Mira Voss, and they found a death certificate 20 years ago. Then they found you, listed as her only child." "Only child," Liana repeats, the word strange and bitter in her mouth. Cale nods. "I know. I didn't understand it either. But the more I dug, the more it made sense. She gave me up. Kept you, I don't know why." Liana's hands are still clenched in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She forces herself to breathe, to focus on something other than the way the ground feels like it's shifting beneath her. Through the window, the ocean stretches out endlessly, gray and cold. Harrow Point is just visible in the distance, a dark line of cliffs against the horizon. She used to sit there with her mother, watching the waves, listening to her. Mother hum songs Liana can't remember anymore. She wonders now if her mother was thinking about Kyle on those days. If she was mourning the child she gave away. If she carried that grief every single day and never once let it show. "Why didn't she tell me?" Liana says, more to herself than to Kyle. "I don't know," he says, "but I think we deserve to find out." Liana looks at him then, really looks at him, at the way his jaw tightens when he speaks, the way his eyes hold hers without flinching. She sees her mother in him. She sees herself. And for the first time since the message arrived, she lets herself believe it. This isn't a scam. This isn't a mistake. This is real. She leans forward, her posture opening, her guard dropping just slightly. She's still cautious, still afraid, but something deeper has taken hold, a hunger for answers, a need to understand the woman who raised her and the life she chose to keep hidden. "Okay," Liana says. "Tell me everything." Kyle nods, and the conversation begins to unfold, slow and careful, like peeling back layers of skin to expose something raw underneath. But just as Liana starts to settle into the rhythm of his voice, Kyle pauses. He looks down at the photograph, then back at her, his expression shifting into something heavier. "There's something else," he says, "something she never told either of us." Liana's breath catches. "What?" she asks. Kyle's hands tighten around the edge of the folder. We weren't just siblings, he says quietly. We were twins. The word hangs in the air between them, sharp and impossible. Twins. Liana feels the cafe tilt slightly, as if the floor has shifted beneath her chair. She grips the edge of the table, her knuckles going white. Outside, the ocean continues its relentless rhythm. Waves crashing against the cliffs at Harrow Point, indifferent to the way her world is collapsing inward. "What?" she says, though the word comes out thin and breathless. Kyle looks at her steadily, his expression calm but weighted with something she can't quite name. Sympathy, maybe, or shared grief. "I found the birth certificate," he says. "It took me 2 years, but I finally got access to the sealed records. We were born on the same day, at the same hospital. Twin A and Twin B. She kept you. She gave me up." Liana shakes her head, as if the motion alone might undo what she's just heard. "That's not possible. She would have told me. She wouldn't have." But even as she says it, she knows it's not true. Her mother kept secrets. Her mother never spoke about the past, never mentioned Liana's father, never explained why they lived alone in a small apartment with barely enough money to get by. Her mother was a woman built from silences. "How old was she?" Liana asks, her voice hollow. 19, Kyle says. "She was 19 years old when we were born. 19, still a child herself, alone, terrified, carrying 2 lives she didn't ask for." Liana tries to imagine it. Her mother, young and desperate, holding 2 infants and knowing she couldn't keep them both. Tries to imagine the moment she made the choice. Tries to imagine how she lived with it afterward. Kyle reaches into the folder again and pulls out another document, this one thinner, more fragile. It's a letter, handwritten on yellowed paper, the ink smudged in places as if water, or tears, had blurred the words. "I found this in my adoptive mother's belongings," Kyle says quietly. "She never showed it to me. I don't think she knew what to do with it." He slides the letter across the table. Liana's hands are shaking as she picks it up. The paper feels rough and brittle under her fingers, like something that's been folded and unfolded too many times. The handwriting is small and careful, slanted slightly to the right. She recognizes it immediately. It's her mother's. She begins to read. "To whoever raises him, I don't know how to explain this. I don't know if I even should. But I need you to understand that this wasn't easy. This wasn't something I wanted. I'm 19 years old. I have no family, no money, no one to help me. I thought I could do this alone, but I can't. I can't take care of 2 babies. I can barely take care of 1. I'm keeping my daughter. I don't know why I chose her over him. Maybe because she was born first. Maybe because she looked at me in a way that made me feel like I owed her something. I don't know. I just know I couldn't give them both away. I couldn't let go of everything. Please take care of him. Please love him the way I can't. I hope one day he'll forgive me. I hope one day I'll forgive myself. I'm sorry. The letter isn't signed." Liana reads it twice, then a third time, her vision blurring as tears gather at the edges of her eyes. Her breath catches in her throat, a small sharp sound that she tries to swallow down, the ambient noise of the cafe, the low murmur of conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, the soft clatter of plates. Fades into silence in her mind. All she can hear is her own heartbeat, loud and uneven. She sets the letter down carefully, as if it might disintegrate if she holds it too long. "She was alone," Kyle says, his voice soft. "She didn't have anyone. I don't think she had a choice." "There's always a choice," Liana says, and the bitterness in her voice surprises even her. Kyle doesn't respond. He just watches her, waiting. Liana's hands are still trembling. She looks down at the scarf draped over her shoulders. It's the deep burgundy wool she's worn like armor for 20 years, the fabric that still carries the ghost of her mother's presence. It feels heavier now, suffocating, like a weight she's been carrying without realizing it. She pulls it off and sets it on the table beside the letter. The gesture is small, almost insignificant, but it feels like something breaking open. She lied to me, Liana says quietly. My entire childhood, every birthday, every Sunday at her grave, every time I wondered why I felt incomplete. She knew, and she never said a word. She was probably protecting you, Kale offers. From what? Liana snaps. From the truth? From knowing I had a brother? From understanding that she made a choice, and I just happened to be on the right side of it? Her voice cracks on the last word, and she presses her palms against her eyes, trying to hold herself together. But the tears come anyway, hot and silent, spilling down her cheeks despite her best efforts. Kyle doesn't say anything. He just sits there across from her, his own grief quiet and contained. Outside, the ocean churns under a gray sky. Harrow Point looms in the distance, dark and unyielding, a place where her mother used to take her when the world felt too big. Liana wonders now if her mother came here to remember. If she stood at the edge of those cliffs and thought about the son she gave away. If she ever regretted it. Liana wipes her eyes and looks at Kyle, really looks at him, at the sharp line of his jaw, the dark eyes that mirror hers, the calm way he holds himself even though he must be breaking too. Do you hate her? She asks, the question barely a whisper. Kyle exhales slowly, his gaze drifting toward the window, toward the ocean beyond. I don't know, he says. I spent 2 years being angry. But now, I just want to understand why. Liana nods, though she doesn't know if she wants understanding or just someone to blame. The photograph sits between them, creased and faded. The boy and the woman. The moment captured before everything split apart. Liana picks it up and holds it to the light, studying her mother's face one more time, the sadness in her eyes, the way her hand rests on the boy's shoulder, gentle and uncertain. She wonders if her mother knew, even then, what she was about to do. She wonders if love is ever enough when the world demands more than you can give. Liana leaves the cafe without saying goodbye. She walks to her car in a daze, the letter still folded in her pocket, the photograph pressed against her palm. She doesn't remember starting the engine or pulling onto the coastal road. She just drives, the ocean appearing and disappearing through gaps in the trees until she reaches Harrow Point. The cliffs are empty this time of day. The sky is beginning to shift, amber light bleeding into violet along the horizon. The wind is sharp and cold, carrying the sting of salt air that burns her eyes and makes her skin feel raw. She parks near the edge and gets out, her legs unsteady beneath her. She walks to the metal railing that runs along the cliff's edge and grips it with both hands. The surface is rough and cold under her palms, grounding her in something solid. Below, the waves crash against the rocks with a relentless rhythm, white foam churning and dissolving into the gray expanse of the ocean. She stands there for a long time, just breathing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Her mother was 19 years old, alone, terrified, holding 2 infants she couldn't afford to keep. Liana tries to imagine it. The weight of that choice, the knowledge that whatever she decided would haunt her for the rest of her life. She tries to imagine what it felt like to hand over a child, to watch him disappear into someone else's arms, knowing she would never see him again. She thinks about all the moments she spent with her mother, the quiet Sunday mornings, the way her mother used to braid her hair, her fingers gentle and careful, the way she would hold Liana too tightly sometimes, as if she were afraid she might vanish if she let go. Liana always thought that grip was love. Now she wonders if it was guilt. She remembers her mother's silences, the way she would stare out the window for long stretches, her expression distant and unreachable, the way she never talked about the past, never explained where Liana's father was, never offered more than the bare minimum of answers. Liana used to think her mother was just sad. Now she knows her mother was carrying a secret so heavy it shaped every moment of their lives together. 27 years. Her mother lived with this for 27 years and never once let it slip. Liana pulls the photograph from her pocket and holds it up to the fading light. The boy, the woman, the pale blue dress. She studies her mother's face again, the soft, distant expression, the way her hand rests on the boy's shoulder. She wonders if this was taken the day Mira gave him up. She wonders if her mother kept a copy of this photograph hidden somewhere, a reminder of the life she chose to walk away from. She wonders if Mira ever forgave herself. The wind picks up, whipping her hair across her face. She doesn't bother brushing it away. She just stands there, letting the cold seep into her bones, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence in her mind. And then slowly, something inside her begins to shift. She thinks about the letter. I can't take care of 2 babies. I can barely take care of 1. Her mother wasn't a villain. She wasn't cruel. She was just a 19-year-old girl who made the only choice she thought she could make. Liana's shoulders drop, her hands unclench from the railing, the tension she's been carrying since the message arrived, since the photograph shattered her understanding of everything, begins to dissolve. Not into peace, but into something softer, something closer to acceptance. She starts to cry. Not in rage this time, not in betrayal, just in release. The tears come quietly, slipping down her cheeks and mixing with the salt air. She doesn't try to stop them. She just lets them fall, standing at the edge of the cliffs where her mother used to bring her, where the past and present collide in the endless gray expanse of the ocean. She thinks about Cale, about the life he lived without her, about the brother she never got to know, the twin who should have been beside her all along. She thinks about how easily their lives could have been reversed, how she could have been the one given away, the one searching for answers, the one holding the photograph and wondering why. Her mother made an impossible choice, and Liana is only beginning to understand what impossible means. Sometimes we hold our mothers to impossible standards, forgetting they were just people trying to survive their own storms. If you've ever had to choose between anger and understanding, maybe you know how hard that is. Subscribe, because these stories remind us we're not alone in the breaking. The sky deepens into violet, the first stars beginning to emerge above the horizon. Liana wipes her eyes and takes a slow, steady breath. The photograph is still in her hand, creased and worn. She tucks it back into her pocket. A strange tether to a brother she's only just begun to know. She doesn't have answers yet. She doesn't know if she'll ever fully forgive her mother. But she knows, standing here at the edge of the world, that love and loss are more complicated than she ever imagined. That sometimes the hardest thing we do is survive our own choices. She hears footsteps behind her, soft against the gravel. She turns and Cale is standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression quiet and cautious. "You followed me," she says. "I didn't want you to be alone," he replies. Liana looks at him. The stranger who shares her blood, her face, her fractured past. And for the first time since they met, she doesn't feel afraid. She feels something else, something tentative and fragile, but real. She nods. "Okay," she says. "Stay." They stand side by side at the edge of the cliffs, the ocean stretching out before them like an endless question. The sky has deepened into indigo now, the last traces of amber fading into night. The wind has softened slightly, but the cold remains, seeping through their clothes and settling into their bones. For a long time, neither of them speaks. Liana keeps her eyes on the horizon, where the sea meets the sky in a thin, dark line. She can feel Kyle's presence beside her, solid, patient, waiting. She doesn't know what to say to him. She doesn't know if there are words for what they've just learned. Finally, Kyle breaks the silence. "I'm angry too," he says, his voice low and rough. "Not just at her, at everything." Liana glances at him. His face is shadowed in the fading light, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the water below. "I spent 2 years looking for you," he continues. 2 years piecing together fragments, trying to understand why I always felt like something was missing. And now I know. I had a sister. I had a twin. And I never got to know her. His voice cracks slightly on the last word, and Liana feels something inside her chest tighten. "I wonder what it would have been like," Kyle says quietly, "growing up with you, knowing I wasn't alone, having someone who understood me without me having to explain." Liana's throat feels thick. She swallows hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "You got a family that chose you," she says. "I got a mother who kept secrets. I don't know which one of us got the better deal." Kyle turns to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You think I had it easier?" "Didn't you?" Liana asks, though there's no bitterness in her voice now, just exhaustion. "You had parents who loved you. I had a mother who spent 27 years lying to me." "She didn't lie," Kale says. "She just didn't tell you. That's the same thing." "No," Kale says firmly. "It's not." Liana looks away, her hands gripping the railing again. The metal is so cold it burns. Below them, the waves crash against the rocks, relentless and indifferent. "I'm jealous of you," she admits quietly. "You got to be chosen. I was just kept." Kale exhales sharply, shaking his head. "You think being given away feels like being chosen? You think I didn't spend my entire childhood wondering why my birth mother didn't want me?" Liana doesn't respond. She doesn't know what to say. "I used to imagine her," Kale continues, his voice softer now. "I'd make up stories about who she was, why she gave me up. I told myself she was young and scared, that she did what she thought was best. But there was always a part of me that wondered if I just wasn't enough." Liana's chest aches. She turns toward him, really looking at him for the first time since they came here. His face is tight with emotion, his eyes wet but determined not to cry. "You were enough," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were always enough." Kyle's jaw tightens and he looks down at his hands. "Then why didn't she keep me?" "I don't know," Liana says. "Maybe she thought you'd have a better life without her. Maybe she thought she was doing the right thing. Or maybe she just couldn't handle both of us," Kale says. "Maybe it was easier to give one away than to admit she couldn't do it." Liana doesn't have an answer for that. She's not sure there is one. They stand in silence again, the wind tugging at their clothes, the ocean roaring below. The stars are beginning to emerge above them. Faint pinpricks of light against the darkening sky. Then Kale reaches into his jacket and pulls out the photograph. He holds it between them, the image faint in the dim light. "Look at her," he says quietly. "Look at her face." Liana looks. Her mother's expression is soft, distant, weighted with something she can't quite name. Sadness, maybe. Or resignation. "She must have loved you so much to keep you," Kyle says. "And she must have loved me enough to let me go." Liana's breath catches. She stares at the photograph, at the woman who made an impossible choice. And for the first time since this began, she sees her mother not as a liar or a villain, but as a 19-year-old girl who was doing the best she could with what she had. Love isn't always enough, Liana says softly. No, Kale agrees. But maybe it's all we get. They look at each other then. Really look. And Liana sees herself reflected in his face. The same dark eyes, the same sharp jaw, the same grief they've both been carrying without knowing why. She realizes they're mourning the same thing. Not just their mother. Not just the life they could have had, but the family that never existed. The childhood they should have shared. The bond that was severed before they even had a chance to feel it. The cold is seeping through her coat now, settling deep into her skin. She shivers, and without thinking, she reaches out and rests her hand on Kyle's arm. He doesn't pull away. He just stands there, solid and warm beneath her touch. Can we start over? She asks, her voice trembling slightly. Kyle looks at her, surprise flickering across his face. Then slowly, he nods. Yeah, he says. I think we can. Liana's posture shifts. She turns fully toward him, no longer looking out at the ocean but at the person standing beside her. Her brother. Her twin. The stranger who shares her blood and her grief and her fractured past. I don't know what this looks like, she says. I don't know how to be a sister to someone I just met. Neither do I, Kyle says. But maybe we figure it out together. Liana nods, something loosening in her chest. It's not forgiveness yet. It's not peace. But it's something. A beginning, maybe. A tentative step toward understanding. They stand there for a moment longer, side by side, letting the wind carry the weight of everything they've just said. Then, without speaking, they turn and walk back toward the parking lot together. Not yet siblings, but no longer strangers. 3 days pass before Liana returns to the cemetery. She wakes early on Sunday morning, the ritual pulling at her like muscle memory. But this time, she doesn't go alone. She brings the photograph, the original, the one Kale gave her, and a small bouquet of wildflowers she picked up from the corner market near her apartment. The cemetery is quiet at this hour. The air smells of damp earth and cut grass, the way it always does in the early morning. The light is soft, filtering through the trees in thin golden beams that make everything feel gentler than it is. Liana walks the familiar path to her mother's grave, her footsteps muted against the gravel. She's wrapped her mother's scarf around her shoulders again, the deep burgundy wool warm against her skin. But it feels different now. Not like armor, just like memory. She stops in front of the flat stone marker. Mira Voss, beloved mother. Liana kneels and places the wildflowers against the headstone. Then she takes the photograph from her jacket pocket and leans it carefully against the cold stone, beside the flowers. The boy and the woman, the pale blue dress. The moment before, everything split apart. She sits down on the ground beside the grave, her legs folded beneath her. She's never done this before. Always stood, always kept some distance between herself and the earth. But today she needs to be closer. She needs to sit with the discomfort, to let it settle into her bones. For a long time, she just looks at the photograph, at her mother's face, at the boy who became her brother. Then she speaks. I met him, she says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Kyle, your son, my twin. The words feel strange in her mouth, like a language she's only just learning. I didn't know, she continues. You never told me. I don't know if you were protecting me or protecting yourself, but I know now. She pauses, her throat tightening. The silence around her feels heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustle of leaves overhead. I read your letter, Liana says, the one you wrote to his adoptive parents. I know you were alone. I know you were scared. I know you thought you were doing the right thing." Her voice cracks slightly, and she has to stop to breathe. "I'm still angry," she admits. "I'm still hurt. But I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to see you the way you were. Not just as my mother, but as a person who made an impossible choice." She looks down at the photograph again, the way her mother's hand rests on the boy's shoulder, the sadness in her eyes. "I think you carried this your whole life," Liana says. "I think it lived inside you and you never let it out. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to carry it alone." The tears come then, quiet and steady, slipping down her cheeks and soaking into the scarf around her shoulders. She doesn't try to stop them. She just sits there, letting herself feel everything she's been holding back. "I wish you'd told me," she whispers. "I wish I could have known him sooner. I wish things had been different. But they weren't. And I'm learning to live with that." She reaches out and touches the photograph, her fingers tracing the outline of her mother's face. "I love you," she says. "Even now, even knowing what I know, I still love you." The wind picks up slightly, rustling the trees above her. The light shifts, softer now, warmer. Liana closes her eyes and lets herself sit in the silence, in the space between grief and acceptance. She doesn't know how long she stays there. Minutes maybe, or longer. Time feels strange here, stretched out and suspended. Finally she stands, brushing the dirt from her jeans. She looks down at the grave one last time, at the photograph resting against the stone. "I'll come back," she says. "And next time, maybe I'll bring him with me." That evening, Devin shows up at her apartment with takeout and a careful expression. He doesn't ask questions right away. He just sets the food on her counter and waits, the way he always does. Liana sits on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, the scarf still draped over her shoulders. She's exhausted, hollowed out in a way that feels both painful and necessary. "How are you doing?" Devin asks finally, his voice low and cautious. Liana considers the question. She could lie. She could say she's fine, that she's figured it all out, that everything makes sense now. But she doesn't. "I don't know yet," she says honestly. Devin nods as if he expected that answer. He sits down beside her, close but not too close, and they eat in comfortable silence for a while. "I met him again," Liana says eventually. "Kyle, we talked. I don't know what we are yet, but we're trying." "That's good," Devin says. "That's a start." Liana nods. She pulls the scarf tighter around her shoulders, the familiar weight of it grounding her. "I'm learning to live with complexity," she says. "With a past that doesn't fit neatly into the story I told myself. It's harder than I thought it would be." "Most things are," Devin says gently. Liana looks at him. This steady, patient presence who's been beside her through all of it. And feels a flicker of gratitude. "Thank you," she says. "For not telling me I'm crazy." Devin smiles faintly. "You're not crazy. You're just human." They sit together for a while longer, the apartment quiet around them. Outside, the city hums with life, indifferent and endless. But inside, Liana feels something shifting. Not resolution, not peace, but something softer, something closer to acceptance. Later, after Devin leaves, Liana picks up her phone. She stares at Cale's name in her contacts for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she types a message. "Do you want to meet again?" She hits send before she can second-guess herself. The response comes almost immediately. "Yes." Liana exhales slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It's not much. But it's something. A beginning. They meet at Harrow Point again, but this time the world feels different. The morning light is soft and golden, spilling across the cliffs in long, warm beams. The ocean is calmer today, the waves rolling in with a gentle rhythm instead of crashing violently against the rocks. The air smells of salt and wild grass, and overhead, seabirds call to each other in lazy arcs across the sky. Liana arrives first. She parks near the edge and steps out of her car, the warmth of the sun settling on her face like a gentle hand. She's wearing her mother's scarf again, but it feels lighter now. Not a burden, just a piece of her history she's learning to carry with grace. She sees Cale walking toward her from the other end of the lot, his hands in his pockets, his stride easy and unhurried. When he reaches her, he smiles, a small, cautious thing, but genuine. "Hey," he says. "Hey," she replies. They stand there for a moment, neither quite sure where to begin, but the silence between them isn't heavy anymore. It's just quiet. Comfortable, almost. "Want to walk?" Cale asks. Liana nods, and they start down the path that runs along the cliffs, their footsteps crunching softly against the gravel. The ocean stretches out beside them, endless and patient, and the horizon glows with the promise of a clear day ahead. For a while, they don't talk. They just walk side by side, letting the sound of the waves and the call of the seabirds fill the space between them. Then Cale speaks. "I used to hate thunderstorms when I was a kid," he says, his voice quiet but steady. "My mom, my adoptive mom. She'd sit with me in the living room and we'd count the seconds between the lightning and the thunder. She said it helped to know how far away the storm was, like if you could measure it, it wasn't so scary." Liana glances at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "Did it work?" she asks. Cale shrugs. "Sometimes. But mostly, I just liked that she stayed with me." Liana smiles faintly. "My mom used to hum when she was nervous. I didn't realize it until I was older. But whenever something was wrong, money trouble, or bad news from a doctor, she'd hum this old lullaby under her breath, like she was trying to calm herself down." "Do you remember the melody?" Cale asks. Liana thinks for a moment, then hums a few notes. They're soft and uncertain, half forgotten, but they carry the weight of memory. Cale listens, his expression thoughtful. "I wonder if she hummed that to me too. Before." "Maybe," Liana says. "I like to think she did." They walk a little farther, the path winding along the cliffs, the sun warming their shoulders. Liana feels something loosening in her chest, something that's been tight and coiled for weeks now. She doesn't have all the answers yet. She doesn't know if she ever will. But standing here beside Cale, sharing small pieces of themselves, she realizes that maybe answers aren't the point. "What was your childhood like?" she asks. "Really?" Cale considers the question. "Good, mostly. My parents loved me. They never made me feel like I was anything less than theirs. But there was always this gap, like a piece of the story was missing. I didn't know what it was until I found the adoption papers." "And now?" Liana asks. "Now I know," Cale says. "And it's complicated. I'm grateful for the life I had, but I'm also angry I didn't get to know you sooner." Liana nods. She understands. She feels the same way. "I used to think family was supposed to be simple," she says. "Like if you loved someone enough, everything else would fall into place. But it's not, is it? It's messy and broken and full of choices that don't have right answers." "No," Cale agrees. "It's not simple." They stop walking and stand at the edge of the cliffs, looking out at the ocean. The water glimmers in the sunlight, vast and unknowable, stretching toward a horizon that seems impossibly far away. "I'm glad you found me," Liana says quietly. Cale glances at her, something soft crossing his face. "Me too." They stand there for a moment, the warmth of the sun on their faces, the sound of the waves below. Then Kyle reaches out and squeezes her shoulder gently, just once, before letting his hand fall back to his side. It's a small gesture, but it feels like something shifting into place. "Do you want to meet again?" Liana asks. "In a few weeks, maybe? We could get coffee, or just talk." "I'd like that," Kyle says. Liana smiles. Genuinely, openly, for the first time since learning the truth. It's not a smile born from resolution or certainty. It's a smile born from the tentative hope that maybe, despite everything, they can build something new. "Okay," she says. "It's a plan." They walk back toward the parking lot together, their steps slow and unhurried. The seabirds call overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a car door slams. The world continues around them, indifferent and endless. But here, in this moment, they are building something fragile and real. When they reach their cars, Kyle pauses before getting in. "Thank you," he says, "for giving this a chance." "Thank you for finding me," Liana replies. They exchange a final look, half siblings, half strangers, but no longer alone. And then they drive away in opposite directions, the ocean receding behind them. Later that evening, Liana sits on her apartment floor with her phone in her hand. She opens her photos and scrolls until she finds the copy of the photograph she kept. The boy and the woman, the pale blue dress, the moment before, everything split apart. She looks at it for a long time, studying her mother's face, the sadness, the resignation, the love that was never quite enough but was all she had to give. Liana thinks about the letter. "I hope one day he'll forgive me. I hope one day I'll forgive myself." She doesn't know if her mother ever found that forgiveness. But sitting here now, with the scarf draped over her shoulders, and the photograph glowing softly on her screen, Liana thinks maybe she's starting to. Family isn't about blood or perfection or unbroken lines. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about sitting with the messy, complicated truth and deciding to stay anyway. She still misses her mother. She still wishes things had been different, but she's no longer trapped by the past. She's building something new. With Kale, with herself, with the memory of a woman who made an impossible choice and carried it alone for 27 years. Liana closes her eyes and thinks, some truths break you open, but they also let the light in. And for the first time in weeks, she feels like she can breathe.